Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdcast Dave, and today I'm joined by Korso from D&D Korso. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Happy to be here.
So we've just been chatting a little bit before we got started here, and I'm fascinated by you already because not only are you doing this D&D TikTok thing, which I found that like a lot of my audience wasn't even really aware of TikTok per se, but especially like the TikTok D&D community. And then I come to find you're also, a professional magician as well, an illusionist,
Yep.
and also something about circus stunts. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds really cool.
Yeah, so I'm an illusionist or a parlor magician. So, like a lot of stage stuff, a lot of comedy interactions and some escapes, danger stunts, fire eating. That's kind of where the circus stunts come in, is the
Okay.
fire eating, things like that.
Oh, yeah, I've met a few fire breathers and fire eaters in my time. We had a couple players in one of our groups, and they would do they were fire breathers, which was really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love all the, performancey friends I have. And there's so many different niches to it, from fire breathers, fire eaters, fire dancers. So yeah, there's a lot of those fun folks.
Yeah, that's so. How did you get into being a magician? And then we'll circle back to the D&D stuff.
Yeah, sure. No, and that's kind of the path it took. So I in high school and college, I was in it for theater. I did theater all throughout high school. I really, really enjoyed just performing in general. And I said, all right, I'm going to go to college for this, and got some scholarships to do that, and started working on a theater degree. Well, in between college and high school, I picked up some, like, a few basic card tricks, and I absolutely loved that. And so I started kind of showing those off to people, and it was just like a bug that bit me. It wasn't something I did as a child. It wasn't, the classic. You talk to a lot of entertainers and they're like, yeah, I started when I was 5 because a magic kit. And it's like, no, my mom showed me a card trick when I was like 18, just one night while we were hanging out. And I broke it down and was like, how does this work? And I figured it out, like why it worked mathematically and how I could then change it. And suddenly I was doing the trick back to people who knew the original trick but didn't understand how I was doing mine. And I
Mhm.
loved that. So I started researching more, looked online, looked on YouTube, and started just picking it up from there.
That's pretty cool, especially too because like I always feel like when you hear their stories, you're expecting to be like, as a little kid, I saw a magician perform, and I've been doing this since I was 5.
Yeah. And it was like, nope, I was like 18. I learned a trick and I was already a stage performer. So it just like made sense. And then from then on, I kept learning more and more. There was a street performance festival that was, one town over. And I went and I saw that, and there were magicians there. And I was just like, whoa, I knew a little bit of magic, but these guys were something else. And I got to talk to them, eventually became friends. And, I learned I have a very carny upbringing as far as learning magic, because it was a performer here and there who would teach me one thing that they didn't
Yeah.
mind teaching me. And they're like, oh, you know what, kid, here, check out this trick with a couple rubber bands, or here, let me show you one of my favorite things to do just in passing with a card.
Yeah.
And then I started becoming this like street performer of magic. And that's how I cut my teeth in general of my skills. Was once I had enough, I went and I would street perform, and I would be out performing on the street, just doing a sidewalk show for like 4 or 5 hours in a bar town. So it would be at like 10 p.m. I'd set up, and about 2:30 in the morning I'm going home. But I was drilling and I was performing all night.
So there was no like apprenticeship.
Yeah, like my apprenticeship was the streets, was
Yeah.
performing. And the apprenticeship would be like one of these people just being like, hey, here's a trick. I like the way you're talking. I like your enthusiasm. And you asked. So, yes, there is one thing I'll show you. I'm not going to tell you what I did in my show, but here's something you should know. And I would take those and I would build a show out of these pieces that these people were willing to give me. And then I would go to YouTube and figure out, oh, there was a trick that was sort of like that. I could make it bigger. And so, yeah, it was a amalgamation.
Have you sawed anyone in half yet?
I saw myself in half.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a comedy bit I do in my show. That's when I do like full on corporate stage shows around the country. And one of my comedy bits is about how like everybody always asks, and you saw so many halves. So I'm going to do it one time. And if it goes wrong, the show is over. If it goes correct, we put that to rest. Okay, deal? Like, so it's a lot of fun. Just like, and that's my characters. I mess with the audience. Like, I do one card trick in my stage show, and I like talk about it. Like, I do all this stuff. I saw myself in half. I do fire eating, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to know, Corso, do you do card tricks? So before you get to say that, I'm going to do one to end the show. That way no one can say anything. Like, and that's just like the character vibe.
Yeah, nice. So, how does one going from being a magician to D&D TikToker?
So that is an interesting transition. So first off, as a magician, we were talking about this prior, like 10% of being a magician is actually performing. The other 90% is getting people to book you, sending emails, contracts, insurance, and part of that is promotion and social media. So I was very active on Instagram and Facebook, and I met some folks that had told me like, hey, you should look into TikTok because it's starting to take off. And there was a guy here. I'm from Kansas City, and there was a guy here who he said, hey man, you should really get into this. I just hit 1 million followers, and I've never done that. So look into it. And eventually I did. Well, right around the time I started looking into TikTok, the pandemic hit, and every show for like 2020 of mine just sent me an email. I was like, hey, we're canceled. Sorry, we're gone. We're done. And so I had a lot of free time. I, of course, switched over to doing a lot of what I knew, which was I started doing magic as an online show. But in the meantime, I started up a podcast with some other performance friends who were all out of work and just hanging around now. And so we started doing a D&D podcast because we're all nerds. We're all nerds. And we started doing a D&D podcast. We started doing just D&D content, sort of as a joke, like just having fun. And then my D&D TikToks started taking off. And my magic is like just on back burner until like 2021 at the earliest. And so I said, okay, well, during this time, I'm going to pour my attention into D&D as a content creator, because nothing's necessarily depression proof, not 100%, but an online sort of community was something I could keep interacting with even during the pandemic. So that's kind of where my attention went and has been for the last 6 months.
I also feel like, when the end times finally end, everything crosses over with magic and being a magician. Like, even if they're like not a super fan of that, like just regular people, it was something they want to go and see, at least once and check out.
Yeah. And I'm so looking forward to being able to get back to doing shows, but like after a break like this, it's something that like, it's going to come back. It's going to be different. And I'm even thinking of like, I get to bring that sort of edge to a tabletop role playing game. What is it? Because I DM the games I am a part of. I'm the DM, and so it's like as a magician, I get to add fun like perspectives to the games, and let that come into everything we do.
So, back when we could play in person, did you find there was like extra pressure on you to have like cool props?
Not so much in the cool props division, although it's something that like I definitely want to do and integrate more of. But when it came to like the ideas and such, as a magician, my job is all the time just like faking, having otherworldly ability or doing something that is just like undetected. And so I definitely would try and incorporate, even if it's just hiding a plot point from people or getting them to psychologically go in one direction. Like I would purposely try and have that sort of emphasis in the games as well of just, okay, let's see if we can cultivate a magical experience, like a that same sense when I do something on stage and people go, well, okay, wait, but how is that? And I was like, how do I do that in a world where I literally am allowed to have magic? How do I do that where there are monsters and there are fae and there is magic? How do we give that same experience where people go, okay, but wait, hold on, you know? So that's just kind of what, like, how my brain worked on it.
Do you prefer being the dungeon master or prefer playing?
I It's hard to say. I love being a dungeon master because all these ideas get to come to life, but I also adore being a player. I because it's like letting someone else tell their story and me getting to just like, oh, I'm gonna tell this character story, but oh, you twisted it on me. How do I respond in the moment? I love those. Like my wife, will DM games, and I love being that player. But also as a dungeon master, I love the long game. I love thinking ahead of like, what does this mean in 6 months?
Yeah. So, do you find yourself gaming more or less now?
I find myself gaming D&D more than ever than I have in the last 15 years because of the pandemic. I'm in a Wednesday campaign with a bunch of D&D TikTokers. I'm going to be starting another Wednesday campaign. Every Monday night, I run a D&D sporting arena game that I built on Twitch. And I'm part of like a monthly D&D campaign as well. So I'm in like four to five campaigns right now, and it's awesome. As far as other types of gaming, like video gaming and stuff like that, that is still sort of, it's more than usual,
Mhm.
but for some reason, the internet gaming has taken me, and my PS4 is still just kind of like, hey, buddy,
Yeah, yeah.
hey.
Well, I guess too because like that's our social interaction now as well. Like, and I
Yeah,
imagine for someone who's used to performing live, like it's even worse. Like you're used to being around people, and
so many people.
and now it's like whoever lives in your household, or or when we're out in the world and everybody looks like bandits now.
Yeah.
So
So it's a lot of that. Well, and not only so when I'm a performer, when I say I'm a performer through and through. Like I am a magician full time, but I also do stand-up comedy gigs, and I am a slam poet, and I would compete in competitions around the country. And so it was just, if I wasn't doing one type of performing one night, I was
Mhm.
doing some other type. I'm at a bar doing a competition here, or I'm at a corporate event doing this, or I am at a comedy club doing this. And so it was just constantly people and other performers. So it's been so different.
Yeah, and it's like now someone shut off the faucet, and it's like no people.
Yeah. They're
Uh-huh.
like, nope, we're gonna cut off your energy there.
So you mentioned something about sports arena D&D. What is that?
So yeah, I built a game from so when I created my Twitch account, I was like, what do I want to stream? What do I want to do? I want to do D&D. Well, how do I do D&D differently? And I was like, I need to build a game. I want to do sort of a one-shot situation so that people don't feel like if they come in at episode 30, they're lost. It's no, it's going to be a one-shot situation where you could show up tonight and you would be right up to speed. What would I do? And I decided I wanted to build sort of a battle royale arena. And I play tested and thought up a bunch of different concepts. And eventually I came up with what is now the game, Melee Ball. And Melee Ball is like Quidditch meets D&D. You've got 3 players for the home team, my NPCs that I control, versus 3 guests who come in and play their character that they create. They're allowed to bring any level 5 character that they can imagine. And those 3 people create the away team. and we go head to head in Melee Ball, which is a 120 foot diameter circle arena that they are trying to score the most points by the end of the game. We try to treat it as much like a real sporting event as possible. We have two 60-minute halves in the game. We have a halftime show. We have announcers in the crowd, like in the chat, people are like announcing the moves as they happen. So it's basically combat for 3 hours, but combat with a special twist, because not only can the players be knocking each other out for points, but the main objective is there's a ball on the field and there is a goal on the end of the field that keeps moving location after something's scored. And so the objective is to get your hands on the ball and work with your team to score it using athletics checks and your movement and special abilities. So yeah, you get points for scoring, you get points for knocking out players, and you have two 60-minute halves to score the most points.
So in one of our D&D sessions that I ran, we did do a sporting event called Rat Ball, and there's these tribes of kobolds. They would have tournaments to decide which tribe was in charge for the year.
Awesome.
And they would play, they'd play this game Rat Ball, and basically it started when their living god puked out a giant hairball, which was like a bunch of rats. So
okay,
from that they now stitch together dead rats into a ball, and it's like this combination of lacrosse and an obstacle course for them to try and score on it. It's kind of like the similar premise that you explained as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the adventurers wanted to get through their territory, and instead of fighting them, they're like, "Hey, why don't you help us, and you can be our team this year because we keep losing." The other team, they've got this awesome goalie, which is just this big fat ogre that takes up most of the goals and no one can score.
Yeah. That's such a great integration of something like Melee Ball. Like, I love that.
Yeah, it's just something fun and different, and sport. There should be more sporting events in games.
And that's what like I wanted to do, because I don't see the sporting events in the games, but it also like it takes a mechanic, combat, that is already there and lets it be the sporting event, because they have to roll initiative to determine like who's making the moves first. And with Melee Ball, they've got so many different options. Like, are you the person trying to score? Are you the person trying to do the buffing? Are you attacking? And every time they score, 3 things happen on my field. 1, the goal moves to a new location. It's 12 points like a clock, and I roll a D12. So I don't know, they don't know. It might move 1 slot over. It might switch sides of the field. 2, some field effect triggers to where it could be an obstacle course suddenly. There could be an owlbear that's vicious and drops on the field. The goal could start shooting firebolt at the nearest person. I've got a whole list of just random things that, again, we roll, and it's like, all right, everybody, the whole field is covered in fog. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then finally, an anti-magic wave happens. So that way it sort of brings everyone to the same level. So if you've got a level 5 person who is like, oh, I cast mage armor and I'm untouchable, after someone scores, an anti-magic wave hits the field and you might lose that.
Ouch.
Yeah. And so it's all about action economy and thinking it through. It's like, oh, I cast mage armor, someone immediately scores and you lose it. That spell slot's now gone,
We had been doing it. We did a session 0 for a game. And Open Legend was the game system we used. And we had kind of let our patrons vote on the type of game they wanted us to play, the genre. So like there was 3 of them that ended up kind of being really close. So I was like, you know what? We'll make a game out of that. So it was a fantasy steampunk eldritch horror game.
Awesome.
and there was 13 flying cities or floating cities, except for one of them disappeared. And we started doing
Okay.
the session 0, and we're like, well, what about sporting events? And then there's like, well, there's this game called Etherball, and pretty much all the cities were kind of xenophobic, and they stayed away from everybody except for the sports teams that would travel for Etherball, and it became also like this thing that diplomats and diplomacy would be done through the game as well.
Oh, okay.
So for a while, I thought that was going to be the game we were going to play. I thought it was going to be they're going to end up playing an Etherball team, made in in this world. But we eventually moved away from it, and it was always like kind of in the background of like who's winning, what's going on, and sometimes there would be plot threads like, oh, this team that's terrible is all of a sudden on a winning streak and no one can beat them. So it's just little touches like that kind of add to it, to the games we play. So Brian wants to know, how do you handle detect magic? Does it just ruin any magician NPCs?
Okay. Now, are we talking in regards to just D&D in general, Brian?
I don't think you've got people detecting magic in your shows, but maybe Penn and Teller might show up to prove your stuff right.
So detect magic. If we're talking about D&D in general, how do I handle detect magic? Well, I mean, in the rules for detect magic, you can see faint traces of magic, and you learn at school of magic if it has one. I like to give people, it kind of depends on the world you've built, I'd say. And if you've got a world where magic is so common and you cast detect magic and you see a little bit of magic in someone, as a DM, it's just kind of like, yeah, you see magic in them, just like you see magic in your teammates, and you see magic in that woman, and you see magic in the tabaxi. So what? Unless you're casting detect magic in a situation where it is imperative to know, is this a magic item, or is that person who says they don't have magic actually magic, then to me, like, you can easily play it off. Like, I just had that in my podcast. The character, she cast detect magic to find out, is there something wrong with this body? And it's like, yeah, there's something wrong with everybody in this room, including yours. And it actually just gave them more questions than answers, because now they are aware that they're also afflicted and they have no idea what it is. And it's like, what school of magic? Celestial in nature. That's all you can tell. And now they're panicking, and they weren't before they cast detect magic. So it didn't. I think it's all about, as a DM, what is the importance and how do you want to spin it? Like, if you tell them there's magic, but there's faint traces of it, that's a key point. Or if you say, oh, it's almost blinding how much magic is coming off of this. I think it's 100% in your court.
And I mean, also there's really low level magic to kind of trick things like that as well.
Yeah.
Whether it's like getting rid of, being able to detect it, or giving a false aura. What is it? Nistil's magical aura kind of does that, and it's super low level.
Yeah, pretending to have something or covering it.
And also, I imagine too, like a even like a stage magician that doesn't have real magic, would probably go out of their way, even if it's just like, oh, can I find someone to enchant a pebble with continual light on it just so I can keep it in my pocket. So you detect magic on me, and there's absolutely going to be magic.
Yeah, or having some type of bracelet or something that covers you in a shroud. 100%.
It just really depends too, like how prevalent magic is in that world as well, as far as whether people are worried about it. And also it does create an interesting quandary when you have someone that's trying to fake magic in a world where there is a ton of real magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it easier and harder all at the same time, I feel like.
And that's an interesting thing, because if there's a ton of magic and you see magic in this person, that's like, but in a world where magic is not as prevalent, that again becomes super important. is like, this person says they're a magic caster, but there's only like 10 in each country. Are you really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it becomes even harder because it is real, but it's also super rare.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to prove it.
Well,
So
oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how do you feel about illusionists in the game, since you're kind of a real life illusionist?
So I love the idea of illusionists in D&D, because this concept of fake magic in a world where real magic is possible. It's like very, very minuscule bits of magic, like the cantrip minor illusion. You can absolutely bend that over backwards to create some nonsensical things if you really think about it. But when you take a character who, let's say, is just a human with no actual magic skills whatsoever, and you want to fake their ability, that to me is so fun and interesting, because, like, for instance, there is detect magic. Like, do you really have it? But if you took that, to me, they would be like a wizard who, or at least they would be a very good student. In order to fake in a world like that, they'd have to be wise in the ways of, what does fireball look like? Even if I'm going to fake it with gunpowder, what does it look like? What does it seem like? What do I need to be saying if I don't actually have magic? What component am I supposed to carry if you're the type that cares about components and such? I think in a world where there is magic, a magician would have to try a lot harder than in a world like ours where there's not seemingly like legitimate magic. I just have to know, as a real life magician, I have to know, what situations would Dave be looking for to catch me off guard? What would he be looking for to verify it is not magic? And so long as I can't let him see those things, we're good. When you add to that, what would you verify that it is magic? Now I have to, like, okay, what would it really do? What would it fake? What would it, and there's so much more on it. Like, there's more pressure. So I think a magician in a world with real magic is even harder, thus making them even potentially stronger.
Do you use any magician NPCs in your games?
I have definitely had some crafty characters in my games before. I've not gone the full gambit to make them straight up magicians per se, but I do have the interest in doing that in one of my upcoming campaigns.
Yeah, I imagine like that could be kind of a mixed bag for you too, because it's your day job, right? It's what you already do. So
Yeah.
maybe you in D&D you want to do something different. Although now during the end times, you can sneak a little bit of your old life back
Old
into
world
the game.
back in. Yeah, kind of bleed it together.
Yeah, for sure. So do you basically play all D&D? You play other games as well?
Yeah, so mainly on tabletop I play D&D, but then, like, I do, as far as home games and stuff, I love, Betrayal and House on the Hill, and all the board games like Settlers of Catan and Carcassonne, and so I'm a very board game household. And then as far as, like, actual role play games, right now it's just D&D, but I have a lot of interest in exploring other ones, like Monster of the Week and like Zweihander, things like that. I definitely interested in checking those out.
Yeah, I just got to play in a game of Monster of the Week. That was a lot of fun, and we're currently running a Cipher System game on this channel. It's kind of like science fantasy, post-apocalyptic.
Awesome.
I don't know if you've heard of Thunder the Barbarian or Flash Gordon, but Flash Gordon probably, but Thunder the Barbarian's a little more obscure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was like we're trying to like, they're heavily inspired by those, and you know what, 2020 itself. So
yeah,
the
inspired
game
by 2020, the nonstop.
In the game, the world kind of goes to shit in 2020 and nearly ends, and then we pick it up 55 years later. from the fallout of that,
Okay.
and now the characters are just trying to survive and help reestablish civilization.
Yeah, try to get it back on track.
Yeah, but now there's like alien technology and lunar daemons and mutants and mutates and all kinds of fun things like that. So after like all kinds of horrible things happen in 2020, like the world being on fire, disease and murder insects, then a comet comes, heads towards the Earth and it gets diverted at the last moment, but it pulls the moon into the Earth's atmosphere, causing tidal flooding, and killing most of the population.
Oh man.
Yeah, which is I directly ripped that off right from Thunder the Barbarian. So
yeah,
not even trying to pretend.
Yeah, not even trying to pretend we didn't. We're just doing it for the fun.
That's right. We call it sampling. Actually, that's we sampled.
Gonna sample a little bit of this, sample a little bit of that.
Yeah, so that's been a lot of fun. We got a retro astronaut, basically, a spider monkey, Little Red Riding Hood in a gas mask, and a very like kind of He-Man inspired hero with aquatic tech.
Okay,
aquatic alien tech, I should say. So it's been a lot of fun so far. It's been a weird ride.
That sound like the amalgamation of those characters. I love the ridiculousness of what a party can consist of.
Yeah,
because it's not like in a lot of cases when you're watching a show or something, it's like 5 of the same person, except this one is 20 years younger and this one is a family man and this one's a millionaire. And it's like, okay. But then there's like, oh no, we have a werewolf on the team. We have human James Bond over here, and then we have an alien from another planet, and like really gets this wild combination of like what is going to happen.
It definitely adds a bit to it. Yeah. So the spider monkey is Blue, and also named Blue, and the other character goes by the name Red. So they kind of came in together. So that's been a lot of fun. I realized I had been on a hiatus from DMing for a while, and I'm like, I need some regular games in my life that I'm running. So I was like, here, let me run this game that I haven't run before. And I know I'll make it a stream and add a bunch of new production into it that we've never done before.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. But, it's funny. Like, I love these rules light game where you can kind of just like pick them up and jump into them fairly easy. And and Cypher System is definitely one of those. And it's funny too, because like I've done that. I keep showing the book, right? Because it's such a big book, it's so thick. But it's like you end up needing like a quarter of it to run the game. The rest of it is like all player stuff and like what to do if you want to run in this, in this kind of genre and stuff like that. So I was like reading through and brushing up, and I was like, oh, I really didn't need to read that much. I was expecting to be in for the long haul. And I was like, oh, that was nice. And I had played it a couple times, and I find sometimes when you play games that are like rules light, you're expecting our rules for a particular thing, and it just isn't there, right? So
yeah, you're like you're looking for like, no, I need the ruling on exactly if you roll a 12 when I'm doing this, what do we? And it's like, just figure it out. I don't know, house rules.
Yeah, well, that comes from D&D mostly, I think, because you're used to so many rules.
Yeah. And that's why I like the concept of like Monster of the Week. It's like, okay, 6 and below is a failure, and I kind of get to decide how. And it's like, okay, great. 7 to 10, mixed success. That's such a fun concept. It's a mixed success. You get sort of what you want, but it's not at 0 cost. Like, yes, you do get to stab the bad guy, but they're a clawed monster. You're going to get hit.
Yeah. Well, so concepts like that are great to kind of pull out of other games and bring them into, like, if you're playing D&D or whatever. And, that's one of the reasons why I really highly recommend people experiment and play other games, because you learn these cool things that you can do that add a lot to a game. Like in one of our last sessions of the game I'm running, like by the dice, they failed to do the thing that they were trying to do. But I'm like, well, that's not all that interesting, right?
Right.
Instead of having them fail, why not have it succeed, but in ways they didn't intend, and causes complications and problems for them going forward. So that one, they get to keep working on the problem. So maybe they will solve it, maybe they won't. But two, like it's more interesting than just like, oh, you failed and the thing didn't work and we're done with that part of it. I mean, sometimes you do need that, but other times
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
And like the concept of, I've heard some fun ways for like a nat one, for instance. One way that people can handle nat ones is allowing your players to tell you what the repercussions are. Instead of the DM just saying, all right, now your bow snaps in half and you fall on your face. That can be very unpleasant for them because they roll a nat one when they're trying to do something cool and it goes wrong. And you're like, okay, that's a nat one. You tell me why that didn't work. Like, what happens? And they're like, my character's impulsive, so she jumped up and tried to front flip without checking the footing, and a brick falls, and I slip and fall. And it's like, okay, great. Take 1d4 of force damage. Just that concept of letting them tell you, why would your character have made a mistake right now? Are you always on top of things, so it had to be an external? Yeah, someone's arrow hit me in the middle of my shot. Okay. I really like that, is just like giving them handle over things like that.
And sometimes too, like if the players really buy into that kind of system, like sometimes they'll be top than you would have as the GM, and just do make crazy things happen that maybe you wouldn't have expected.
They're like, yeah, I have a breakdown remembering I don't like to attack people, and you're like, oh, okay. You're in the middle of battle having a breakdown. Let's go.
yeah, that's going to be interesting considering where you're at right now.
Considering lives depend on this. Okay, roll again.
So for folks that are watching and they're just meeting you for the first time, what kind of content do you create over on TikTok?
So on TikTok, you're going to find a lot of, it's mainly D&D content. I'm D&D Korso, and so I do mainly D&D content. I have a couple of things that I stray towards. One is I do a lot of villain content, and that's just one of the things of finding a niche in something you can do. And there was a lot of people doing the jokes about D&D and all the tropes. And I started taking all the tropes I saw from the big creators and twisting them to like the villain's perspective. Like when everyone's trying to play a super cool character, but the villain is way outclassing you. Like it's just going to go badly. Like what happens to a party when they meet the villain in episode 1 and they recognize it? Like someone detects magic and says, I think you're the bad guy. That's a level 18 bad guy, and you're level 2. This isn't going to go well. Are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to wait for the story to get you there, or do you want to be the party that, So I do a lot of comedy content as to like that perspective. I also do, as a stand-up comedian, I do a lot of actual like D&D jokes. Like I had a series for a while, which I'm going to bring back, of D&D one-liners, and where I would just like make terrible puns and D&D jokes using just like things from the books.
So the D&D TikTok community is great. Like you could go over there and be like, oh, I need a quick laugh, right? And then like 50 TikToks later.
Yeah. And you got people who are doing stuff to make you laugh. You got people who are building entire storylines on their TikTok. So you watch them create like an OC, an original character, and they're like, hi, let me introduce you to, Kelsifer, the Twitch stream, player. But then in the next TikTok, they show you Kelsifer broke their hand and can't play anymore or can't cast spells. And now 30 TikToks later, a month and a half later, this character dies. And you're like, oh, I've been seeing that dude all month. No. And so, yeah, there's so many wild, fun, interesting things people have done with TikTok, and especially the D&D community, especially when they twist it and they're like D&D in real life, like having to roll when you open up the fridge. Do you find food? That's a nat one. You open the fridge and suddenly something jumps out at you. It's all fun.
It's full of Jello,
Yeah.
gelatinous cube Jello.
Yeah. And you're allergic.
Yeah, you've got people dressing up and cosplaying as D&D characters.
Artists doing art and drawing, just all sorts of wild, fun stuff.
So you mentioned you're in a game with some other TikTokers. Who are you playing with?
So on Wednesdays, I am in the Fey Lie, which is run by Dice Cream Sandwich, who is a fantastic TikTok content creator. He just hit a huge milestone. I think he was in like the 50K or higher number, and then like 10K on Instagram. So Dice Cream Sandwich is the DM. Then the other players I play with are all fantastic. We've got Yerpy11. Yerpy11 makes dice and resin molds of things. So Yerpy has a huge following for their dice making, like blown up to like 350, 400K followers on TikTok, just doing these dice molds that are really cool and awesome. So check out Yerpy11. Red Queen Hales. She is known for not only her dragon cosplay and a lot of her like really intense content, but also her art. She's a killer artist. She actually designed lots of the art for my podcast. Then Super Goat, the Super Goat, Moose. He is another great player. Super Goat handles a Twitch stream called the Super Splash of Color. Oh, this is strange. There we are. I forgot Google.
Yeah.
So Super Splash of Color, and that is a game where he just does like D&D one shots, but with all people of color. So to give them, a good shout out and a good content, hub to exist. Let's see, we got Moose, Yerpy, Dice, Red Queen, and then we've got Saint Verse. Used to be known as Aussie Warlock, but is now Saint Verse, and he is from Australia. And so he does a lot of great stuff, great robot character. But also when we're playing, it's like 10 in the morning for him and like 8 at night for us. So yeah, check out Saint Verse. And I think that's the 5 of us. Yerpy, Saint Verse, Moose, Red, myself, and then Kevin. Yeah.
Now, the podcast you do, is that an actual play?
Yes, it's an actual play. Like it's episodic. So it's a continual storyline. It is a lot of mystery. It's all homebrew. I built the world myself, built the continents, built the Pantheon. So yeah, there's a lot of fun, intricacies into that.
So usually Joe asks about dragons, and he's screaming dragons in the chat now. Do you have a favorite dragon? That's Joe's usual question. It's become a main staple of the show now.
Okay, do I have a favorite dragon? Well, one of our players is a dragonborn in the show. So that is one way to spin that question. And Shenzi is fantastic. But if you want me to pick like a dragon, so this is interesting. I do another podcast that is live streamed, and it is just talking about monsters out of the Monster Manual. So I do get to talk about dragons. So I really love the dragon turtle, because there's just like a lot of nonsense involved in this underwater giant that collects gold and sinks ships. Like dragons attacking towns is one thing. And that's, they collect gold and they create a horde, but a dragon turtle sinking ships or making deals, because that's the thing, is in their stuff, you can make a deal with them like, hey, please don't sink us, we will literally give you all the gold on board and anything else we have, just let us pass. So I just really like this concept of the underwater adaptation of that. But Joe says, actually, it was the mention of the Dragon Lady. Oh, about Red Queen that caught your attention. Yeah, go check out Red Queen Hails.
Yeah, so turtle dragons are pretty cool. There was a part of an arc that kind of happened in like a game. So me and Ted were both running games out of the same area. So there would be things that would happen and we would incorporate them into our games. So one group of players murdered, well, killed a turtle dragon. So so I had the other group of players running to their mate that was angry about their mate being murdered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which led to some interesting role play and other events where that group, I believe the other group managed to talk their way out of fighting the dragon turtle and convincing them that they weren't the same people, and making some kind of bargain with them.
Like, hey, it wasn't us. I mean, it was, but it wasn't us. I love that.
Yeah, dragon turtles just look so badass. I mean, if you look at look like they really exist too, right? In the real world, it's called an alligator snapper.
Yeah,
and they're just, but I feel like the dragon turtle just has a little bit nicer disposition.
Yeah,
than an alligator
just
snapper.
A little bit.
I mean, even like a regular snapper turtle are pretty mean looking. Like I grew up from a lake, and I remember as a kid, and I don't know if it's just my memory was distorted, because I was a kid at the time, but like there was a bunch of us packed in the car with our parents, and it was pouring, and there was this huge snapper turtle that was trying to cross the road, and in my memory, it's the size of a tortoise.
Yeah, it's huge, right?
It was
the
huge.
Size of a car. In your mind.
But my mom and her friend get out of the car and they're going to try and catch the snapper because they know the diner in town makes snapper soup and they wanted to sell it. It's like a D&D quest, right? And they wanted to sell it to the diner, right? But like I said, even if it wasn't the size of a tortoise, it was still pretty big. And snapper turtles are a whole lot of nope once they hit a certain size, right?
Yeah, no, there's no, not what we're here for.
At a certain size, you can just pick them up by their tail and they can't get you. But there is a point where they get past that size and now they can reach anywheres with that neck of theirs.
I would not want to have to handle that quest. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I might have to work that back into one of my games at some point. For sure. Just because.
Yeah. What if you make campaigns that are just based on people's wild childhood stories?
Yeah.
And they just make a bunch of one shots. You're catching snapping turtles for the soup.
Well, I mean, I like incorporating weird things from real life into our games.
Gives them that character,
and I just get inspiration from strange places sometimes. Like I used to listen to this radio show on NPR called Car Talk, and it's just these two old guys talking about cars, right? And people will call in. I'm not a motorhead, don't really care about cars, not into it all. For whatever reason, I just like listening to these two guys talk.
Yeah.
And so this woman calls in and they're like, oh, you just need to get this part and you can go to junkyard and it'll be pretty cheap or whatever. And I'm just like, just watch out for those junkyard harpies. Make sure they don't get you. I was like, junkyard harpies.
Junkyard harpies.
That needs to be a thing.
You're like, boom, that's it. That's it now. I'm on it.
I know. So we have a video about this arcane junkyard in our world that's ruled by junkyard harpies. And instead of luring people in with their song, they animate junk with it. And
ooh.
In one of the previous ages, we had these giant arcane mechs. And in there, there's one of them there's parts of one left. So they basically they animate the arm of one and use it to move stuff around in the junkyard, like a crane.
That's awesome.
So I don't know.
So this makes me This makes me think about telling you. So I know I didn't really mention it much, but I just kind of did the monster podcast that I do.
Yeah.
Um, what we do in that is we grab two monsters randomly out of the monster manual, and we have 1 week to learn about them. And we tell when we come and do the podcast, it's like a 25-minute podcast that we do. We talk about what they are, some of their stats and info stuff, but it's also for people who don't know D&D. We talk about like what is an equivalent in common day, either lore or like movies or anything. Where would you have seen something like this so that you have a reference?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, to end the podcast, we draw, we make them battle, but not in combat. We draw a random job title, and we are now deciding which one of these would be better suited for that job. Like, which one would we hire? So like we had like the dragon turtle and the helmed horror, and we drew circus performer. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we had to then sit and debate like which one of these would be a better circus act. And so that's a lot of fun, but it's also like with it, I'm starting to do something where in my podcast world, I'm building a separate thing where these monsters that are all working jobs are gonna exist. So we're going to have these monsters that are a janitor, and these monsters that are the mayor, and someone's neighbor is a Draco Lich, and like all of these things, basically building this like welcome to Night Vale type world. And so yeah, that's just like a fun thing.
So are you just taking like the winners from the debates and they get the job and they'll be in your world?
And that's that's basically what I'm thinking is how we're going to start doing that, is actually having a place for them, is the winner that we decide we're going to put in the world. But also we do an extended version of the podcast. So the podcast is only 25 minutes long. That's going to be in audio form, but we stay on Twitch and we chat with the chat room, and we do more questions about the monsters only for the live audience. And some of those questions that we're going to start doing is we're inverting the monster. So what is the exact opposite of that monster? So if you like, we just did it for the shadow, and a shadow zaps your energy and makes you weak. Okay, what is the inverse of that? A creature made out of light, but it's still a monster. So what is its negative drawback? Well, we ended up saying it's a creature made out of pure light. It's going to, instead of zap your energy and make you afraid, it's going to make you fearless to a fault. In its presence, you don't sense danger. You don't anything. And we just like tried to completely invert a monster to create a new horrifying thing. And I think that one we decided it doesn't even realize that it's a danger to you. It just is like intoxicating to be around, to the point that you are like high on, you would jump off a cliff because it's the fastest way to get down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's one of those things that it's like creating these twisted versions of the monsters are also sort of what we want to incorporate. And so like you're saying, it's a harpy, but instead they're doing something different. That's sort of what we were building.
I'm not going to lie. I was hoping you were going to say we had them rap battle, epic style at the end.
That would be ideal. Yeah, I think now you're right. You fixed the whole show.
Yeah.
And now they're gonna epic.
Although having jobs is pretty cool too. I do like that. How do you guys randomly generate the jobs?
So we just sat down and we thought up as many different positions, and they're not just jobs. Like some of them is like there's job like mayor, like mayor and police officer and teacher, but also there are just like positions, like which one would make a better neighbor, which one would make a better personal trainer, but that's like a job, and which one would make a better like counselor, or we twisted it to be who would make a better supervillain, who would make a better boss. Like the job, it doesn't matter what the job is, which one of them would make a better boss for your job. And then we randomly, just at the day, we in the podcast, that way we don't have time to prepare. We talk about the monsters, and then we grab the list and we randomize it, and whatever ends up top is the question for the day.
So I will say there is a website that does this, and it gives you 6 of them when you hit the button.
Okay.
Ooh, and there's an options button. I don't know what the options button does.
Okay, so there's like a random job creator.
Yeah, I just googled random job generator, and I was like, I was not disappointed.
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
We might look into that.
Yeah, the last time I hit the button, radiological technologist, editor, database administrator, urban planner, entrepreneur, and translator, automotive mechanic. Yeah, it gives you some sports coach, accountant, judge, firefighter, police officer, public relations specialist.
See, that would be great. And then we could just roll a D6.
Yes, that's what I was thinking immediately. It's all set up already.
That's perfect. Yeah, I might look at that. We might honestly transition to something like that because we have a big list, but we're constantly just scratching out names that we've used so we don't repeat.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I like that.
And it does seem to pull up like all kinds of stuff and weird stuff you've never heard of before too.
Because that would be fun because we have to pause real quick and look up like, wait, what is that?
What does this do?
What does this one do?
Oh, number 6 on this one is telemarketer. Oh, that's a great job for certain monsters. And the monster's just like, I'm evil, but I'm not that evil.
Yeah, I'm not that bad. Ooh, and that is another twist that we do in the Twitch section after we like sign off of the podcast, but we keep doing it for the viewers. One of the other questions is we're now starting to take them and create an NPC of them. Like the last one we did, I had the intellect devourer, and we're like, how do we create a good NPC of this? And that was interesting, like creating a good guy character, intellect devourer.
That is interesting because they kind of live to eat brains and explode out of people's skulls.
Yes. And yeah, we twisted it to be this concept of like, what if it accidentally, somehow they messed up the ritual when they're making them and it kept its original consciousness. And it, fun. Out of rage, doesn't want to eat people. It, like people's brains, it wants to get back at the mind flayers for turning it into this. So it already ate someone, and that's unfortunate, but it exists in their mind now and can control them. Now it just spends its time hunting other intellect devourers. That is what this NPC is an intellect devourer that can hunt them because it can sense them, it can hear them, it can target them, and it knows all their tricks. And it will go and jump from one body to another to devour them.
That's a pretty cool concept. And then they don't have to murder other people if they stick to just intellect devourers.
Yes. And so if someone's already been eaten and is being controlled, it's unfortunate. There's probably not a way to get you back unless it gets access to a wish spell. But at the very least, it's going to put a stop to this intellect devourer because it knows it's probably luring more people to get killed.
They're such a nasty monster that punches way above their weight class.
Their challenge rating of 2.
Yeah. I mean, you've already you've mentioned both of the nastiest monsters, that punch way above their weight class, the intellect devourer and the shadow. Our contact director, Doug, is always talking about that would be the worst apocalypse, the shadow apocalypse, where the world is overrun by shadow. And because every time it kills someone that's not evil, it just makes another one.
Yes. And that's terrifying.
I did 2 encounters back to back, right? Well, not back to back, but like within a session. And one of them was I literally threw like 30 to 60 chokers at the party. Like they're high level, and they like the cleric used blade barrier and made a holy blender for the most part. Yeah, and killed most of them right away, but not before that party happened to have a couple of bullets that they had acquired that were able to pull this earth sled for them. But the bullets got totally turned into ground beef by the chokers. And then they destroyed the chokers like it was nothing. But then, the very next session, I think they went into this tomb, and it was like there was only like 3 chambers or 3 encounters, There were shadows. It wasn't like an overwhelming number of them, just like a handful of them, and like 2 shadow encounters back to back, and they're like, "Nah, we're out." They hiked up their robes and they beat feet to the sunlight as quick as possible. And I want to say they were like they had to be like 9th level at least.
And you had to run.
And they had to run. That party would trash my monsters left and right, but this little half CR monster sent them running, because that strength drain is no joke.
And it lasts.
Yeah. It does. And they were all Dex fighters. So.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I mean, they had a cleric and they were able to fix it, but it was a humbling experience for them.
And I like setting that sort of thing up. Not to say like you want to crush your players, but you want to give them challenges. And so there sometimes needs to be something where it's like, oh, you can handle this big monster? Fine, let me give you 10 little monsters. But because of their ability, you're a terrible match for them.
Yeah.
Just give that fear a little bit again.
I often will throw in these encounters where the monsters are so underpowered, they just like rip through them, and and they can feel good about certain abilities. There was another, and it's weird because the D&D math just never works right. And like these encounters are like beyond deadly, but they actually end up being fairly easy for them.
Yeah.
Like I used one encounter where it was like a death knight, a nightmare, and like just tons and tons of zombies. But I knew the cleric was high enough level. He was just going to be dusting them left and right. So they were more of an inconvenience than anything. But it was cool because like the cleric got to be like, oh, like this ability I don't get to use that much is super cool because I'm just blowing zombies apart left and right like they were nothing.
Yeah. And they're like, I get to be a juggernaut.
Yeah. So, I think it's cool to give them that. And I know I've seen some DMs, they get kind of precious with their monsters and they're worried like they're not challenging enough. I'm like, you know what? I get them on the next one. It's not a big deal.
Honestly, if your monster isn't challenging enough, tweak the monster a little bit. Give it, for some reason, double health. Like it's a big version of that.
Yeah.
Or, beef up something about it. Like just let it get an extra attack because it's a fast one.
Where it dies and then it instantly comes back as a zombie version or something.
Yeah.
There's definitely fun ways that you can do it. But, but sometimes I just let them have it, though. I'll be like, okay, they get to feel good about themselves and be like, this guy was a chump for us. We're awesome. But we are up on the hour mark, just past. Final thoughts before we head on out?
Check out all the stuff I do because I'd love to have you folks there. And just chatting D&D here was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I greatly enjoyed it. As always, folks, links are in the description. After this is no longer live, it'll be in the pinned post.
Yeah, every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time is Melee Ball.
Nice. Go check it out. With that, until next time, stay nerdy.
See ya.